Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live webinar, Demystifying Residents Council Bylaws. My name is Stephanie Ventura, and I'm the Director of Education at the Ontario Association for Residents Councils. I'm joined by my colleague, Melissa Matheson, who is the Education and Home Support Manager. Hi, Mel.
Hi, everybody. I think we still have some more people coming in too.
Oh, great. So we can wait a couple minutes, but these are just our introduction slides. So in the interest of everyone's time, and for those who arrived on time and early, we are going to keep going. In this session, we'll provide an overview of what bylaws are, talk about why bylaws are important to every residents council. The first part of this session will focus on information sharing, and in the second part, we'll answer questions that come from the audience and that have come through the registration process. In the question and answer box is where you can type your questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer them at the end.
Okay, so before we get started, we would like to express our gratitude and appreciation by acknowledging that the land that we all reside on. So together, let us now pause as we acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today, from wherever we are virtually participating in today's meeting. Let us take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land we each call home. We do this to affirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. We acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this nation home. Let us now join in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how each one of us, in our own way, can move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration.
Thank you, Melissa. So this slide just talks about some webinar housekeeping. So for today, you will notice that the chat box is disabled. This is just to minimize disruptions and to ensure that we see all of your questions coming through in the right spot in the question and answer box. Questions, again, will be in the question and answer box just at the bottom of your screen. It should say Q&A. That's where you can type your questions right in. The webinar will be recorded. We get this question all the time. It is recorded and will be made available on our website within the coming days, and a copy also is sent to all participants. After the webinar, as soon as you close the Zoom screen, there will be a pop-up screen asking you to answer some quick questions, and we really appreciate your feedback. So please take a couple minutes to do the evaluation for us. So during our time together today, we will be going through very high level, very briefly, the Fixing Long-Term Care Act and taking a look at what it says about residents' councils. In addition to that, we will be looking at what it doesn't say. So what's missing that would really help residents' councils operate. Then we'll get into bylaws, the reason why we're all here. What are bylaws? Why your residents' council needs them? And what resources does OARC have available to help you create bylaws? After that, we'll dive into a case study with real calls that have come in through our home support. Mel will take us through some of those calls and some of those common questions that have come through that could be solved if the council had bylaws. And then we turn it over to you for questions at the end of the presentation. So the Fixing Long-Term Care Act, this is the legislation that governs all aspects of long-term care in Ontario. It came out last April and it replaced the Long-Term Care Homes Act of 2007. So the Fixing Long-Term Care Act, in addition to talking about the Resident Bill of Rights, also has very specific rules, laws, it's the law, for how councils need to operate, what homes need to do for councils to run successfully. Some of those things that are mentioned in the Act are that every home, every long-term care home must have a residents' council. That's the number one. Homes, some other things that they talk about that the Act mentions is that the home must appoint an assistant who's acceptable to the council. So this is someone that the council has approved to work with them, someone that they feel comfortable with. The Act specifies how and what home management will communicate with the council. So some of you may be familiar with the line in the Act that says that the home's administrator has 10 calendar days to respond once they've received any concerns from the Residents Council. So that specifies how the home should communicate with them, how frequently, what the timelines are. And it also talks about what the home must communicate with councils. So the emergency preparedness plan, the quality improvement plan, the resident rights, financial information. There's so many things in the Act that the home must communicate with the Residents Council. It also talks about the powers awarded to Residents Council. So there are distinct powers that each resident council has, including things like planning and sponsoring events for the home, collaborating with community groups, advising the licensee of any concerns. And another thing that the Act talks about is it requires that homes not only assist their councils in exercising their powers, but do so without any restrictions or interference. So it's not enough that the home doesn't interfere with council operations. They also have to assist the council and promote the work of the council. So now what's missing? So there are some things that are missing, and it's mostly the how. So we know that each home must have a residence council, but it doesn't talk about what the meetings look like. There is a line that says that the home administrator must meet with the council at least quarterly. So some homes might interpret that as, well, we only need to have a council meeting once every 3 months. But it doesn't actually talk about what the meeting looks like. So this is what's missing. What does an agenda look like? How are the minutes shared? Are they, the Act says that the minutes need to be posted in a conspicuous place in the home that's accessible, but is it 1 copy? Is it 5 copies? Does everyone get a copy? It doesn't specify that information. How are decisions made? So do residents vote? Is it a consensus that needs to happen, or is it just a majority vote? These things are not covered in the Act. And lastly, how does the resident council exercise their powers? So it says that they can plan and sponsor events. Well, how do they sponsor an event? Can they raise money? Can they have a bank account? All of these things are missing from the Long-Term Care Act. And it's quite intentional. The ministry knows that each residence council is different. Different communities do things differently. The needs of the residents living in those communities are different from home to home. So they've allowed the homes themselves to make these decisions that work for them.
So what is a bylaw? So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary states that a bylaw is rules adopted by an organization, chiefly for the government of its members and the regulation of its affairs. So really, in short, it is a set of rules that your council leaders and its members come together collectively to agree upon on how to run your meetings and to really conduct your business as a council.
What we've heard from the registration, some of the comments that came in during the registration were that these are coming from homes that already have bylaws established. So bylaws have provided structure and ground rules. Another home said that the bylaws are a source of guidance to myself as a new staff member. So these are some common reasons why councils need bylaws. In addition to these, bylaws are important. They provide guidance and direction, as we've mentioned. They eliminate confusion. When there are new team members in the home, or when the leadership structure of your council changes, there might be some practices that the previous staff assistant, the previous resident council assistant, or the previous administrator was familiar with, that when that person is no longer there, there's some confusion and a lack of continuity and consistency for the people who fill in for them or who come in afterwards. The bylaws, one of the most important parts about having bylaws is, it's important to talk about the meeting structure, how often meetings take place, how you vote, how elections are conducted. All of those things are very important. But something else that the bylaws allow you to do is to customize things for the people who are living in your home. So we know that not everyone is the same. People have different methods of communication, different levels of cognition, different ability and desire to be involved in things. And when you know what the legislation says, and you know who the people you have are in your home and what they need to be involved, then you can write those things down, capture them in the bylaws. So an example of this could be, we have a lot of, we're in a home, we have a lot of residents who aren't able to participate in residence council, maybe because they have, or they're living with cognitive impairment and they find the meetings too overwhelming, or they find that they're not contributing in a way that's important to them. In your bylaws, you could have a line that says, the council is aware of the recommended agenda items for each year. They're aware of their powers, that they have chosen to create a simplified agenda so that more people can be involved in the council. So we've heard that some councils, we know councils should review the Resident Bill of Rights 1 or 2 every month. That's our recommendation, but some councils don't. Some councils prefer to spend their meeting time talking about activities and programs and things that are happening in the home, what's happening in the life of the home. And the way that they share information about the Resident Bill of Rights is in a different way. So instead of you doing that at their meeting, maybe they hand out a document. Maybe they share the Clio booklet that is almost updated. Maybe they print posters and distribute them. Maybe there's a program on the calendar, a Resident Bill of Rights program, where the home residents have an opportunity to participate that way instead of it happening at your meeting. So this is the place where you would capture those nuances that occur in your home and meet the needs of the residents in your home. And lastly, the bylaws help the residents shape the place they call home. So we've given quite a few examples about how you can do that, but the bylaws, they shape how their council works, and it's specific to each home.
So here you will see, in response to the growing demand, OARC has created a new bylaws fact sheet. And it actually went out yesterday, I believe, in our OARC in action. And it's in there, you can download it off that link. It's a fact sheet that can serve as it's like a quick guide, a conversation starter that you can use to initiate the bylaws conversation with your group. On the front page, you can see here, there's examples of some bylaws in the dark blue-green area. It kind of talks about some things that we've already spoken about, the definition of bylaws, why would a council need bylaws? And the third question here, it says, does every residence councils have the same bylaws? And no, every home, as Stephanie has mentioned, every home is unique. Every needs and preferences of its members are very specific. So the bylaws reflect the unique circumstances of every individual council. And that's why we are kind of give these guidelines to help each home in their own specific way. And on the back page, it's a guideline of how your councils can work through actually putting together those bylaws in place, like I said. When starting a resident council to create your bylaws, it's a really good idea to kind of ask yourself some questions of who you would like to be involved in making these bylaws and creating them together. Do you want your resident council assistant to be involved to help with guidance, taking notes, writing things up on the computer for you? And who are regular attendees at your resident council meetings? Who are those who are, very active in the home on the units? in your councils. And it's a good idea to really bring up this at your general meeting, as the bylaws must reflect the collective will of all members. So during your general meeting, you can bring this up and develop objectives together as a group. You can ask people in your resident council group if they want to be involved. And so once you've kind of asked these questions, you've determined who is going to be a part of that group, then you can put together a working group, really a small working group, to put together those bylaws. And so on our next slide, it shows another template and another resource that we have created, which is the bylaws template. This is an amazing tool that's very ready to use. It's customizable. You can use it as is and just plug in your council specific information, or you can change it, you can adapt it, because really remember that this is a guide to help you. Whatever suits your needs as a council, this is just one way that it can be done. Feel free to add anything, take anything away that your council might feel is important. And the template is found on our website under the Education and Support tab. You click on Tools and it's titled OARC Council Bylaw Template. So Steph has it up here right now. And as you can see, the different sections, there's members' roles and responsibilities, the leadership members, what their roles and responsibilities would be, section 4, which is a code of conduct. And we're gonna give a little bit later some examples of calls that we've gotten that can be addressed with each of these sections. Section 5 is meetings. Steph, I think you have a really good example for council meetings, with your minutes. So as you can see underneath the section meetings, there's minutes. And Stephanie has shared an example that I would love for you all to hear, because I think it's a perfect example of a bylaw that's very easy, but has a huge and successful ripple effect for the council.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. For the people who joined the Resident Council Assistant Forum yesterday, this is a bit of a repeat for you. So the example is the home that I worked at before joining OARC. We had a very active council, a very strong leadership team, and really as the Resident Council Assistant, my role was just to keep the conversation going, to keep the meeting going in a respectful manner, and make sure that everyone had an opportunity to share, and also to type up the minutes and make sure that the administrator received them. So I wasn't great at typing up the minutes, and our president of the Resident Council called me on it. He came to my office. He would come to my office often, 3-4 days after the meeting, and say, "So, have you had a response yet from the administrator?" And truthfully, nine times out of 10, the minutes were still on my desk, or I hadn't started doing them. So I'm sure that our president called OARC to ask for advice, and it was recommended to him that a set of bylaws be established. So we got together, we formed a group, we used this exact template. Our need was about the minutes and how the minutes would be typed up, what the timeline was going to be. We didn't have any issues with any of the other things. It was all pretty straightforward. So we just used this template and customized the one section that we needed customized. And what we came up with was the president of the council knew that as the recreation manager and the resident council assistant and the other hats that I wore in the home, that I needed some help. And it was him who got that help for me. I couldn't ask for it on my own, but with his support, we approached the administrator and asked for a second member of the recreation team to sit in the meeting during the meeting and to type the minutes right into the OARC minute template. So when I was in the meeting, my strength was getting people to talk and keeping the meeting going. I wasn't able to type up minutes and do that at the same time. So we had an additional recreation team member come in and sit in the background and just transcribe those minutes. And it worked so well. but having it in the bylaw template got the buy-in from the council. So prior to that, other team members were really worried about attending council meetings because the legislation says it's just for residents and only for those approved guests. So they were really nervous about attending the meetings, but after that, they knew, okay, this person can be here. She's doing up the minutes. And it also provided some backup for myself. So if I wasn't there one day, the meeting could still go on because we had someone who now felt comfortable and who the residents felt comfortable with. And we were also able to get the buy-in from the administrators. So anytime we were shifting resources from one place to the other, having the administrators buy-in and backup was always great. And capturing it all in that one document, it really, really changed. Instead of dreading doing meeting minutes, it was just changed the whole thing. So it's just one little example of how this can help you in your home.
So thank you, Steph, just to show how something so simple of just talking about the minutes, putting it in the bylaws and how the ripple effect happens. And that way you can stay present in the meeting too and not have to be writing, which I like. So the next page of the template, it does go over how you want the elections in terms of office to be done. This would even sort of go through exactly how your elections are to be done. Do you want them ballots? Do you want it to be just a hand? And then sometimes too, you could even put a caveat in there that if you only have 4 people who are interested in being, that they can just be acclimated into being it, so you don't have to have a vote. And then in section, it talks about the financial management, representation. This section is really great too, just to show that, you know, you are a council that captures the true collective voice of all residents, your rules of order and procedure, and then conflict of interest, amendments, and adoption of bylaws. So I just want to mention the adoption of bylaws. You'll see that it says adoption and approval and a date. This is when you have presented it to your council, you've gone through the whole document, everybody agrees there is a vote, and so that they have adopted those bylaws as a group. And then you have your signature of the resident leaders that were part of that working group. So this is the template that you can see. And we're going to go through some case studies now. Oh, sorry. Steph's going to take it away.
Just before we get into the case studies, I wanted to share 3 more resources with you. One of them is the OARC team. So we are a small team, but we're here to help. And if you need some help with how to get things started, or you have some specific questions that you'd like answered, give us a call. We're here to help. Send us an email, check out our website. All the information is on there. And if you'd rather hear, or if you'd also like to hear from some peers from other residents or other resident council assistants, you can join one of our 2 forums. So we do have a resident forum that takes place every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And in that forum, you will be connected. It's for residents only, but residents will be connected with others from across the province. And it's an opportunity to find out how different councils are working and how they address certain challenges or meet the needs of the residents in their home. A lot of great sharing, a lot of good laughs. So we encourage residents to attend that. And then once a month, on the last Tuesday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, there is the Resident Council Assistant Forum. So you'll see either myself or Melissa in that forum. And normally we have a couple of topics that we're focusing on, but it's just an open forum, an opportunity to connect with other people in the same role as you and work through some ideas together and share what's really working in your home. It's always nice to hear directly from the people who are involved. We've learned a lot ourselves from both groups.
Absolutely. So before we do get to your questions, I wanted to go over some examples of real home support calls and questions that we get on the phone or when I will go out into the homes. And in each example, a lot of the times of these examples, I will give a recommendation and then say, you know, why don't you put in your bylaws so that this is put in, so the next time the question arises, it's already addressed. But even if, you know, Steph just mentioned that you have us as a support. So even if you have bylaws in place and you still have questions or you still need guidance, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're always happy to help, even if you have bylaws in place. But we do receive a lot of calls on certain questions that having bylaws in place will direct your council and support your council and direct those who support your councils. So without bylaws, there can be confusion of roles. And as we said, there's confusion of how the meeting is run, when they're going to meet. Sometimes time can kind of be wasted in looking for answers or trying to find out how did the council used to do this, what was done in the past, why was it done that way? And these questions typically come up when resident leaders have changed or there is a new resident council assistant. So really having bylaws in place would give that clarity. So I'm going to go through some examples and which bylaws would address that question. So example number 1 is residents council leaders will call asking for guidance on how long their leadership term should be, when they should be doing elections for those leadership roles, and how to do elections. So as we saw in the elections and terms section 6 of the bylaw template, this would outline all of these answers. It would give guidance to how your council is collectively decided on those terms and elections are to be done. So an example would be a 2-year term and elections done every July. Another call or example that we have gotten is, what do I do if my president is not feeling well? Do we still go ahead with the meeting? So section number 5, we did talk a little bit about section 5, which is meetings, but that part of the bylaw template can outline what the council would like to occur if the president is not well. You might put in there that another resident leader will lead the meeting, or that you would like your resident council assistant to lead the meeting in their absence. Another example would be to outline how the council would like the meetings to be run during an outbreak. So this gives the council, but it also gives the home guidance on how to handle the resident council meetings as well, and to make sure that they are supporting your council in having the meetings stay consistent, even through outbreaks. So for an example, you can put that the council would like to have the meetings be on Zoom, or would you like to have them separately on each home unit? Example number 3 of a call or a question that we have gotten is, we have a very disruptive resident who verbally yells and speaks negatively to other members. How do we deal with this? So section number 4 is a great section of the template, the code of conduct, to address these types of issues. It's a great section to include to establish an inclusive and respectful culture. It would outline your practices in relation to expected behavior during the meetings, as well as what type of behavior you expect of your resident leaders who've been elected in those roles by their peers. So this could include how they conduct themselves in the home areas and also in the community and during the meetings. I would also recommend definitely that within the code of conduct to include what would happen if a council member or a resident leader violates the code of conduct, and how would the council address this? So if somebody is verbally abusive in a meeting, would you ask that person to leave the meeting? Another example that we have gotten of questions that would be addressed by bylaws is example number 4. So I am the president of the council, but I'm feeling very overwhelmed and looking for someone to take my place. I love being a part of the residents council and I don't want to step down, but I feel like it is too much for me right now. So in this situation, where residents are not interested in taking a big leadership role, or they might want to, you might not have a lot of interest in having leaders, you might want to look at switching to a shared leadership model. This is where any agreed upon number of residents can be part of the leadership team, and the roles and the responsibilities are actually shared amongst everyone in that group. So in section 3 of the bylaws, leaders, which is the roles and responsibilities, this section talks about the leadership structure and the roles and responsibilities of each member of the leadership team. So you can lay out which leadership model your group adopts depending on the needs of your council and the abilities and strengths of your council's members. You could go with the traditional, which is the president, secretary, and treasurer. Or you can go with the shared leadership where the duties are shared between the whole leadership team. So this is the section that you would put down what those duties would be and how you would share it across the group. So for example, if you have a different leader each month, run or chair the resident council meeting, and then you can rotate through each month and have a different leader chair that meeting. This can provide more inclusion, a wider voice, and division of responsibility, so it's not so cumbersome for just one resident. So these are some examples of what can happen in the absence of a set of bylaws. And, you know, if you're hearing these, maybe some of these scenarios sound familiar to you. It might be something that you've experienced. Many issues can be addressed by your council having clear set bylaws and looking to them when questions do arise or when a certain scenario arises. You can go to those bylaws to have guidance during those situations. And also it's very important to adapt and change your bylaws as your council changes. So if leadership changes or the home residents or, you know, the abilities of your council changes, always look to your council bylaws and adapt them to change the specific needs of your council. So we do recommend looking at them annually and as a group or even as a leadership team and seeing if anything needs to be changed. Are there any questions? Does the group have any questions or thoughts or comments?
So we do see some questions here in the question and answer, and our team has been answering quite a few of them that have come in. I can review them at the end if just so the whole group knows if you can't see the question and answer spot. So we had a question come in that Melissa, you've answered. How often would bylaws be updated? Yes, so we recommend annual updating, or when someone asks that a change be made, or when a change happens with your council. It's a good idea to keep it on your annual agenda template. Just put a line in there that says review bylaws. That's the easy way to do it. Okay.
One is the bylaw required by the ministry. No, bylaws are not required by the ministry, but it is highly recommended for all of the reasons we've went over today.
Thank you. Okay, we have someone who's asked about more information available on the shared leadership model. Yes, so on our website, the bylaws template that we pulled up on the screen, many of those sections also have a fact sheet or a previous webinar that was done to answer questions specifically for each of those sections. So there is one on elections, there's one on shared leadership, there's one on council finances. There are fact sheets and webinars on a lot of those topics already. So we do encourage you to take a look at our website for information. And if it's hard to find something on there, just give us a call or email. We can guide you through. There were also some questions that came in through the registration. One of them was, what is the best way to document bylaws? So that question came in before we showed you the template. So use the template and customize it for your council, and then maybe keep a copy of it at the front of your resident council binder so that it's always there and easily accessible and you can refer back to it anytime. The question about the ministry is, are they required? Are bylaws required by the ministry? So we know when the ministry comes in to look at, to do an annual or proactive inspection, they do look at resident councils and interview the residents council, look at the minutes and that sort of thing, look at the resident council binder. So they're using the legislation. They're using what's in the act. If your council is doing something different than what's in the act, it's a really good idea to have those bylaws that show that the reason your council is doing something differently is because the group decided, the residents decided that that's how they wanted to have their council operate. A quick example is just who attends the meeting minutes. So, sorry, who attends the meetings? So the legislation says only residents can attend the minutes, the meetings, unless guests have to be approved by the council. We have heard though that some homes, some councils will have a different manager each month attend the meetings. Now, if I was coming into a home and I was an inspector and I was looking at your minutes and your binder, and I saw, well, why is there a manager coming in all the time if the meetings are for the residents? They're supposed to be they're intended to be a private opportunity for residents to share openly without worrying about who's listening. So why is a manager attending every meeting? If I don't have bylaws that say this is how our council on this date, by consensus or by majority vote, decided that we would like to have a manager from each department attend for the first 10 minutes, and then the rest of the meeting is just residents, I might have some questions. I might ask if it's the home interfering with the council operations or if it's actually the residents who want it like that. So that's sort of a roundabout way of answering, are they required by the ministry? It's the right thing to do, right? So that we recommend that. Another question that came in through the registration was finances and reporting. How do you report finances? Is that a section that would be covered under bylaws? So yes, on the template, finances is one of the major sections. And we also have fact sheets and webinars, like I mentioned, about resident council finances. In the act, all it says is that the council can fundraise and sponsor, can sponsor and plan events. So in order to sponsor an event, there have to be funds involved. So how does that happen? What kind of fundraising happens? We have heard from some homes that they have a foundation that allocates a certain amount of money to the council to use each year. We have councils who have their own bank account at a financial institution. We've heard from councils who have a lockbox with their funds in it and they keep track on a ledger and have a checkbook. But we need to find out who approves purchases. That's something that's not mentioned in the act. How are purchases approved? Who gets to sign off on a check? These are all things that need to go in your bylaws so that there's continuity and consistency, and so everyone knows how the council is supposed to work. Mel, do you want to get some from the Q&A?
Sure, and that we can just piggyback on that, whereas how do the bylaws speak to the subject of fundraising with the finances? You could put in there sort of how you're able to use the money, how it includes all residents in the home, or if you are going to be fundraising and using the money for things, you can specify sort of, that you can sponsor community group in the community with charities, or you could do, sponsor to do something nice for your team members or volunteers. Having some specifications around how you even use the money when you fundraise can be part of the bylaws. Another question here is, should we post the minutes in our home and how many copies? This is a question that I get a lot too when I've gone to the homes, and there is a recommended that, it is, how does your residence council want these minutes to be posted? Where do they want them posted? And do they want how many copies to be posted? So I know one home in their bylaws, they did where a copy of the minutes each month is posted on every single home area, instead of just being at the front, in the front lobby. And this is a great practice to have, because if you do go into an outbreak and you can't leave the unit, you still have access to those minutes or if you're not able to go down to the main floor because of something, that you have everyone in the building has access. So that's a great indication for a new resident council assistant or whoever is posting your minutes to have a specific places and how many and across the board.
Thank you. I see some more questions here. There's one coming in about, oh, it's disappeared. But it was essentially that the ministry came in and had some concerns about resident names not being used in the minutes, in the council minutes. And so the person who typed the question asked, how do bylaws stand up against this? So again, the Act does not specify how minutes are supposed to be documented. It just says that minutes will be shared and posted in a conspicuous place and accessible to residents. So it really is up to the council how minutes are created. Actually, we have heard the opposite of that, where we've also heard the flip side of that, where the ministry has encouraged councils not to use resident names in the minutes and has even suggested not to use initials if they could be linked back to a specific person. Again, the resident council is a place where residents should be able to speak freely without worrying about anything, and perhaps having their name associated with a particular concern might be something that they're not comfortable with. So to answer your question, if you put it in the bylaws how concerns are going to be documented, then that's a really great thing to present to the ministry. And go back, you know, the legislation too, and we have a document that breaks everything down. So you don't need to be intimidated by questions, right? The legislation, you can have it in front of you and see that it doesn't say anything about names going in minutes. So I hope that helps. And just as a reminder, as the resident council assistant, you are immune. So when you're working for the council, you're working for the council. You're in good faith. You're doing what the council is asking you to do, providing information that they're requesting. Another question came in asking if, related to this, asking if the resident council assistant can make suggestions on items that the council can use their funds for. So if they've got a pool of money that they've raised, they don't know what to do with it. Of course, you know, the resident council assistant, you can answer questions that residents have during the council. So even though you're representing the council at that time and not the home, you're there as a support person. So if they're asking for some ideas, I in the past myself have got quotes for the residents council. So they wanted to buy an umbrella, let's say, for the, or a gazebo for the courtyard. So I got a bunch of quotes for them, pulled them together, presented it to them, and you know, it was their decision. And sometimes they will ask, you know, you can initiate the conversation. What's important is that, you know, they have the final decision. So thank you for that question.
And also, Steph, there's another finance question with fundraising. Is there any limit to the manner in which funds raised can be employed for resident activities? And again, in the legislation, there is no limit to which funds can be raised and put into activities or however the council wants to use those funds. So we know of one home who actually raised quite a bit. Steph, how much money did they raise in, I believe it was one of our resident forums has a resident in the forum where they redid one of their home areas into a retro diner. Do you remember how much they raised?
They raised thousands. They worked very close together with an auxiliary and a volunteer group that together with Residents Council raised money to redesign this activity room. So, you know, the council can choose how to use the funds. We encourage them to think of whole home activities, things that could benefit, you know, more than just the people who attend the council meetings. We have a really great example. One of the homes that we work with, their resident council sponsors every Sunday for white tablecloths to be in the dining room for lunch and a special beverage for all residents, so they can participate, and that's all funded through the Residents Council. They've agreed to do that to enhance the quality of the dining experience for all residents in the home. Okay, so here's a question that we hear quite often, and we sort of touched on it a bit earlier, and it was about who gets to attend the Residents Council. So legislation is very clear. It says that Resident Council is for residents, and you can only have other people attend Resident Council meetings if it's approved by the council. So what we've heard from some residents is they've just moved into a new home, or maybe they've moved from another home to a new home, and all of a sudden there's family members at Residents Council, and this is something that they're not used to. And now they don't feel free to voice their concerns amongst peers because there are family members in attendance. And when they've asked the home's administrator or the resident council assistant, the answer was, well, this is how we've always done it. We've always had family here, right? So there's no agreed upon, this is how we've always done it, doesn't mean that it's an agreed upon practice. And what's really important is that the residents and the resident council assistant, everyone knows what's actually in the act. And then if you decide to do things differently, at least you know what's in the act, and then you can make an informed decision about how you want to do things. So it is possible that your residents council group would agree that, yes, you know what, we do want this family member to attend. But then it's not a one and done. It's a living document. So it's the decision can be changed, and maybe it's specific to one family member who's worked really closely with the council, or maybe it's the family council president or something like that. It's not an open invitation for all family members to attend, because that can really change the dynamic of the residents council. I hope that answers your question.
I think also just to reiterate the importance that you're asking the residents what they want, and then you're following through and giving them that. So if they want a family member to be there, and it might even be that they're only there for the first half of the meeting, because you do want it to be a safe space, and you want it to be the residents' voice that is heard. And sometimes family members might have different concerns and things that they'll bring up that aren't what the residents are wanting to bring up. So that it is something that, you know, this is definitely the space for the residents' voice to be heard.
Thank you. We have a question that's come in that asks, this is more of a process question for resident council. So process between minutes being taken and given to the administrator. Again, that's sort of a gray area. What the act says is that, you know, in my example, it was sort of a gray area. What the act says is that within 10 days, not business days, 10 days of receiving the minutes, 10 days of the administrator receiving the minutes, they must respond. So it doesn't matter if it's, this happened to me actually. Inspector came in and said, it was January 3rd, and the meeting was like January 19th or something. So lots of holidays in that stretch. And they said, well, there isn't a response from the administrator. It's been 10 days. And I said, well, you know, Christmas, Boxing Day, New Year's Day. And they said it's 10 days, not 10 calendar days. The holidays don't matter. So what the act says is that you have administrator has 10 days to respond to any concerns from the council once they've received them. So this is where it gets sort of, it's gray. If it takes me, the resident council assistant, 2 weeks to create minutes, now a lot of time has passed and it's almost time for the next meeting. And the administrator still doesn't have those minutes. So it's really important to capture that in the bylaws, what you want the process to be. We recommend that the administrator receives the minutes within a couple of days, so that they have appropriate time to give it a thoughtful response in advance of the next meeting. Your next meeting might be, your meetings might be monthly, and so having that timely response is really going to enhance the next meeting and show the residents that the concerns that they're bringing forward are taken seriously. If, you know, for some people, it's very hard to bring forward a concern. And if one has been brought forward, we really need to show and to value that they've come forward with a concern.
Think upon that too. Does the admin have to respond if no questions came in? So just to follow along with that. So when you have your meeting, your assistant or your secretary writes up the minutes, and you know, really good practice, like Stephanie said earlier, within 3 business day or 3 days or business days, have those minutes written up and given to your resident leaders to approve the minutes and to make sure that everything that they want to have captured in that from that meeting is in those minutes, and then give it to the administrator to read through and to sign off. So if there aren't any concerns, it is still a good practice to have your administrator still read through those minutes and sign off that they've read it. This way, they kind of, it's like a transparency of what is going on and what is, you know, celebrations from the councils, things that they are things that are important to the residents are getting to your administrator on a monthly basis. One of the things that I had heard just recently in a home, they were a few months ago having some difficulty with their food. And now after about 5 months or 4 months, however long it was, of their home really developing the food and really making some big changes, the changes were being seen by the council members, and they celebrated that day that they were seeing changes and that it was getting better and they were happy. Those are things that you want your administrator to know as well, that they are on the right path with certain things and celebrating things that the council is able to have an influence and that they are shaping the home.
Thanks, Melissa. We were closing in on our time together today, and we do have several questions still in the chat. So these questions, if we don't get to them today, you can please send us an email and we will respond to them directly. But one of the questions that's come up a couple of times is, how do we get this process started if attendance at our residence council is very low? There's only a few residents who attend, and this seems like something that would be done really well with a big group. Well, you can get the process started. Use a strength-based approach and do as much as you can with the person. If they can't do it on their own, then you can do it with them, and start the process just with one person, 1 or 2 people. Sometimes it's easier, you get more feedback when you have something ready to present and go through it and get comments that way. So you don't need a big, large group to get started. Even if it's just one person, one resident who's interested and who wants to do this, it's a quality improvement thing, and you will see benefits from implementing bylaws. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Just looking through the other questions that have come in. A question about, is it a ministry standard to have an administrator sign off on each month's minutes, or is it just good practice? Well, having the administrator sign off on the minutes shows that they've received them, and it gives it a timestamp. Mm-hmm. So without the administrator's signature on there and the date, it's very hard to see when the administrator received those minutes. So where do you start counting the 10 days from? In the absence of that, I think the 10 days would start from when the meeting took place. So it really is in the home's best interest to have that signature and date on the minutes. Another question related was, does the administrator have to respond within the 10 days if there are no concerns? So in the OARC template, the minutes template, there's a concern response section. And we know that some homes have created their own document like this. And a home that I worked at before, what the administrator would do is we would check in after the meeting, and if there were no concerns, which was rare, they would just write a letter saying, thank you so much to members of the Residents Council for giving your time and participating this month. You know, it's great that you're involved in improving things in the home. As I understand, there were no concerns this month, So, look forward to hearing from you next month, something like that. Just very, very simple, just to acknowledge that a meeting did occur. They're aware of it. They're happy that residents are participating. Okay. We're going right down to the wire today, 2:55. Okay, there's a question here about residents at this particular home not being very engaged in decision making and don't really voice concerns or have a vision for residents council. How much can I do as an assistant to help guide them through establishing a residents council with bylaws when at the moment there's not a deep desire to be overly involved? That's a great question, and it's a difficult one for us to answer without having some context about what's happening in your home. So what is the reason why residents are engaged in making decisions? Why aren't they engaged? What we've heard from some places is the council, especially through the pandemic, has felt like, what's the point? We bring up concerns, they're not answered, nobody takes things seriously, nothing changes. So they've slowly stopped bringing things up. That's a bigger problem. Other reasons are, well, there isn't a consistency in response from the leadership team. Maybe the response is very dismissive, like, well, we'll look into it. And they don't see any concrete actions taking place. So they don't see the value of attending council. Maybe the meetings are being run in a way that's not accessible for most of the residents in your home. Maybe the agenda is too overwhelming for them, and it's boring. Maybe it's boring, and they just don't want to attend. They'd like to do something else. Is there some other program or activity taking place at the same time as the residents council? Is it advertised enough? There's so many different reasons why people aren't involved in their home, but asking those probing questions and trying to find out why. One thing you could do is it's a new year, we're relaunching residents council, we're trying to get people interested and involved. Here's your chance to decide how it goes. We can present what the act says and some options that they could do at their council. Have something fun in there. I used to do a vote for Diners Club right in the middle of residents council. So we would get a lot of attention for that because people knew that that was something they could vote on, that they would see happen. I vote for KFC, and sure enough, next month, KFC is going to be at Diners Club. So seeing the results of their participation and their involvement is really important. And these are things we can help you with too. So we really do encourage you to join the Resident Council Assistant Forum, hear more from people there. Join the resident forum for the residents on the video or on the webinar today, and you can get more information that way.
Or you can have myself or Steph come out and do a presentation, or even help with some different ideas and different things to get that interest and some more people involved and engaged. Absolutely, we do talk with lots of groups and lots of homes and see what they're doing. So, we're more than happy to share.
Thank you so much, everyone. This concludes our time together. Thank you for being with us here this afternoon. You could have been anywhere, but you're here with us and we appreciate you. As always, we're encouraged and inspired by your comments at the end of these sessions. So please take some time to fill in the evaluation so we can improve for next time. Wishing you all a good afternoon. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, everybody.